Hey cellists, the name of this video is Better Bow Changes for Cello. So if you're watching this, you may be hoping to get some information about how to make more smooth and beautiful bow changes. And I am going to help you with that. But the real reason for this video is to give you an idea about another way of thinking about your bow hold that may help you with all of your bow changes and your string crossings. If you watch any good cellist or any good bowed string instrument player, two words that you may use to describe their bow hold are loose and relaxed, because it looks loose and relaxed. And so you may be striving to have a loose and relaxed bow hold, or you may have a teacher is encouraging you to have a loose and relaxed bow hold. And I'm sure I have encouraged students in the past to have a loose and relaxed bow hold. But I'm going to suggest today that you change those words loose and relaxed for the words strong and flexible. Now, here's why. If you hold your hand up and just have it very loose, very relaxed, and just do a sort of bow stroke motion, then the fingers look very flexible. It looks like a very nice bow motion. The problem is, once you put a bow in your hand and you're actually holding up the bow, the fingers cannot be so loose and relaxed because you would drop the bow. You just can't hold the bow without that. Or you would end up making no sound because there's no weight on the bow. So just by the nature of holding our bow up, it can't actually be relaxed. Now, here's where the strong part comes in. To hold the bow up, the hand actually needs to have strength because a lot of times you're putting a lot of weight on the hand. So the first finger, it's putting weight onto the bow, and if it's not strong, obviously it's just going to collapse or fall off like this. Second finger also putting a little weight on the string. Third and fourth finger actively trying to stabilize the bow, and in some cases maybe even pulling up on the bow. And then the thumb has to be very strong because that is the fulcrum of the whole mechanism here. So you may have a little bit of pressure of the thumb against these two fingers to hold the bow. Not too much, obviously, no clenching. But to really make the bow work, the thumb is going to be kind of pulling up this way on the bow, and it's got to be pretty strong. And especially when you're at the tip, the thumb is going to be very, very strong to have enough weight into the bow like this. So that's the strength part. So within this strong bow hold, the fingers need to be able to move, to actually literally move the bow like this. This is where the flexibility comes. So even though the fingers are being strong, they're not stiff, they are able to move. And when you add this active motion of the fingers into the entire bow stroke, then we start to have a bow stroke where the hand looks and feels loose and relaxed. But I have to emphasize this again, the fingers are actively doing this to make this happen. A really good way to work on isolating this finger motion is put your cello down, rest your forearm on your knee like this, and then practice moving the bow up and down with just the fingers. Now I'm going to move it over to this side so you can get a little bit of a closer look, but normally I would do this on my right leg. So I'm putting my hand here also just to try to keep my wrist stable. It's okay to have a flexible wrist while we're playing, but for this exercise, we're trying to keep it really just to the fingers and not the wrist. So what you're going to do is try to move the bow, small up and down bow motions like this. Now, it doesn't look that hard when you're watching, but when you pick up your bow and try to do this, you will probably struggle with this. Almost all of my students struggle with doing it, even though it doesn't look that hard just to watch it. Now, by the way, another good way to do this rather than using a bow, you could also just take a pencil or a pen to do this. It's a little less weight, maybe a little easier to get the feeling of this. Also, then you can just pick this up sometime when you're at school or in your office or at home, whatever. Just grab a writing instrument and just practice doing this a little bit. So to break this down a little bit, what's actually happening, so you can kind of figure out how to make this work for you. The first finger is really kind of curling back this way and lifting up. By the way, it's very important that the fingers are not perpendicular to the bow like this. That is just going to be very hard to make that work. Besides, we really should be holding the bow with the fingers slightly angled this way. And that definitely makes this exercise easier to do. So the first finger kind of lifting this way, it's lifting the bow up this way. Second finger, a little bit of that. Third and fourth finger, probably not as much as that, but they're going to be really helping stabilize the bow like this. Now the thumb is a very important part of this. I'm going to turn around this way so you can see the thumb. If your thumb is not flexible, none of this is going to work. So when I'm doing this, what is happening with my thumb, take the bow out, it's moving up and down like this, a little bit like a mouth opening and closing. And the other joints of your thumb need to be able to bend. A lot of students end up with a thumb that's very pressed in here, or even bent but locked this way. And we want this joint to be flexible even when you're putting weight on it, so that it can move up and down like this. So a lot of the key to this is getting the thumb motion to work. So like I said, don't get discouraged if you have trouble with this at first. My fingers are long. I've been doing this for a long time. So for you, at very first, it may just look like a tiny motion, and just don't try to fool yourself and do some other kind of weird motion. It's only going to be an up and down motion of the bow. And again, probably will start out fairly small, but if you keep working on this, I think you will be able to get it to make a little bit larger motion. And really that's all we need, maybe about ½ an inch or an inch at the most. Once you're able to do this isolated finger motion away from the cello, then you can put it onto the cello and just try to make very small bow strokes with only your fingers. You might even want to grab your wrist so that you can be honest that you're really doing this with just the fingers as much as possible. Now, you notice that that is not a very beautiful sound. That's because I'm trying to put a fair amount of weight on my bow while making these tiny bow strokes. It's important to be able to do this flexible motion while you put a lot of weight on the bow. So it's not going to sound great when you do tiny bow strokes, but when you incorporate this into a bigger bow stroke, then it's going to sound more nice, and that's going to make more sense. So if you want to work on this, making a really nice smooth bow changes, here's a way you can work on this. You're going to start, for this today, we're going to start in the middle of the bow, and you're going to get almost to the frog, very close to the frog. Then you're going to do a teeny little bow stroke with just the fingers. Then you're going to go back. You can go all the way to the tip, but I think I'd like to just go to the middle for this today. Once you get here, another teeny bow stroke. So it's another up bow at the frog. Going back, another down bow in the middle. Now you notice that when I do this, I'm not keeping my fingers pulled this way the whole bow stroke. I let them return to their original bow hold motion. So once you can do that, then what happens is, when we get here, as we're making this little bow stroke, the elbow and the arm are starting to try to go the other way. So there's a moment when the fingers are pushing the bow on another up bow while the arm is already starting to turn to a down bow. So if you put that together, same with this side. And this way, you can start to make beautiful bow changes where the sound doesn't drop out. Now, I've had a lot of students over the past, and this may be some of you watching that have this issue where their hand starts to creep up on the bow as they play. And I think that I understand what is happening here. It took me a long time, but I think this is a result of students. These are usually advanced students, good players, who are trying to make smooth bow changes by relaxing the hand at the moment of the bow change. So actually relaxing the hold, loosening the strength of the bow hand. So two things happen there. The sound drops out, and the fingers are likely to lose their place on the bow and move up slightly this way. So if you have trouble with bow changes where the sound drops out and or your hand is sliding up on the bow, this strong and flexible bow hold idea may really solve that problem for you. So you can incorporate this strength and flexibility into all of your bow strokes. So if you're doing kind of a martelé stroke, the flexibility of the fingers really help make this work. Also with a spiccato bow stroke, the bow is bouncing, you're using the bounciness of the bow, but the fingers are really trying to make this happen as well, and that's where this flexible fingers really is important. So the fingers are really actively making these bow strokes. Sautillé bow stroke is another really important one for strong and flexible fingers, and I have a whole video about that, so you can look at that. And now let's just talk quickly about string crossings. If you want to do a little exercise for this, you can use a flexible finger string crossing exercise like this, and so I'm just trying to make the string crossing with my fingers. You can do it on a down bow on the lower string and then turn it around so that up bow is on the lower string. So we encounter both of these in our repertoire. And now in real life, of course, if you're making string crossings, so I'm not only using the fingers, just like the rest of the bow strokes, the arm is doing some of it, but that flexibility in the fingers to help make that string crossing is really going to help as well. I imagine most of you watching this video already have a certain amount of flexibility and strength in your bow hold, but I do hope I've given you a few ideas to help you make your playing even more beautiful.